Hi everyone, and welcome to my next video tutorial where I'll be teaching you guys how you can go ahead and containerize your Django applications. So we're going to make use of the Docker desktop client to help us to build our Docker images and to also run them. Now you want to head over to docker.com and you want to look for Docker Desktop. Now I do have the link here, which is quite long here, and I'll be sure to add this in the description below, so you're more than welcome to head over to the website directly here, which will be easier because the URL is quite long, since it's docker.com/products/Docker Desktop. All right. Next, you want to go ahead and download Docker Desktop for your operating systems. So whether you're on Mac OS, Linux, or Windows, go ahead and download it for your operating system. And you want to first of all click on Download Docker Desktop. So I'm using Windows, so I'm going to download it. Now I have made a lot of tutorials on Docker Desktop before, but I feel my videos weren't as clear. I want to try and be a little bit more detailed and to the point in this video, so decided to go ahead and just add a few things this time with Docker and to just be a bit more clear. Okay, so let's just wait for it to download. So I'm just going to pause the video, and once it's been downloaded here, we're going to go ahead and open it and start up the installer and setup. All right, so we can now see the Docker Desktop has been downloaded. So let's go ahead and open it up. Okay, and what should happen now is in just a moment, our screen is just going to go blank or just blur. You're not going to see it on my screen here because of the security notification. So it will say user account control. Do you want to allow this app to make changes to your device for Docker Desktop Installer? Go ahead and say yes. Okay, so as soon as you click on that message there, you can now see my screen, and it's now going to say installing Docker Desktop. Okay, so do keep in mind this does take quite a while. So what I'm going to do is just pause the video again, and once it has set up, we can go ahead and move on forward. Just be sure to add a shortcut to your desktop here, keep that enabled, and you can just say OK. Okay, so this is where it takes some time, so go ahead and set up Docker Desktop, and once it's been set up, we can move on to the next set of steps, all right? All right, so welcome back. We can now see that Docker Desktop has been installed and the installation was a success. Perfect. So we can go ahead and close this message here and we can move on to the next set of steps. So make sure that you've installed Docker Desktop onto your system. Right. So once that is all done, we can head over to our desktop and we should now see the Docker Desktop icon here. So the shortcut. So just go ahead and click on Docker Desktop and just open it up. So do keep in mind that it does take a while to open up its first time, so let's just be a bit patient here. So it does take a while to set up. All right, there we go. So first of all, we need to accept the Docker subscription service agreement here. So the big note here, just to keep in mind, is it is free for, well, of course, it says here small businesses, fewer than 250 employees, and less than $10 million in revenue. So if you're not using Docker for a business or you have less than $10 million, yeah, you should be fine. So if you're good with that, you can go ahead and just say accept that agreement. Okay. And what's going to happen now is we're going to be greeted with a Docker Desktop dashboard in just a moment. Here we go. So here we have it. So Docker Desktop is currently starting. Now this can take a few minutes. So let's just wait for Docker Desktop to start up. Right. So after some time, you'll be greeted with this prompt here. So we don't need the tutorial. You can say skip. If you want to do it, you can. All right, so the first page that you'll be greeted with is the containers section here on the left. So essentially here, when we go ahead and run our Docker containers, we'll see them all here. Now, you're more than welcome to read a little bit more about Docker containers in terms of Nginx, Postgres, Redis, etc. When we build our Docker images, they will appear here according to the name, tag, status, when it was created, the size of our Docker image, and any possible actions. Okay, if we specify any volumes, they will appear here, but we're not going to go into volumes. So under the beta phase here is the dev environment here, so you can create your own configurable developer environment if you wish, and you can also add some extensions as well if you'd like. But the main focus of this video tutorial is on building a Docker image and then running our Docker containers. So this is pretty much going to be the main focus for this tutorial, okay? All right, so what we can do now is just go ahead and ensure that we have a simple Django application up and running. So all I've done is I've gone ahead and created a simple project with an app here and a single template here, as you can see, that just says containerization in progress. So what we can do is we can just take a look at it. So if I just refresh, we can see just a simple page, nothing too special. All right, so let's actually get started. So what I want to do first of all is, if I have my server running, or if you guys have your server running, just go ahead and close it. So you can just say Control-C and CLS. All right. So first of all, we need to create a Docker file. Now, Docker needs to know what packages to install. So we need to go ahead and run the following command, which is pip freeze greater than symbol requirements .txt. Okay, so I just want to make that a bit, there we go. Okay, and run the following command. Make sure that you are in your projects directory. And just give it a moment, and there we go. So it's going to collect all of the requirements, all the packages and dependencies that we've made use of in our projects. So click on requirements.txt, and as you can see here, if I zoom in, I only have a few packages here. Literally, I've just installed Django, and when you install Django, of course, it goes ahead and adds in a few extra sub packages per se. Okay, so that's all you need to do to start your Docker build here. So make sure you've got that requirements.txt file in place. Great, so now we can build the Docker file. Okay, so what we can do now is build a Docker file in our root directory here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to right click on my project here, elevate, which is my project, say new file, and I'm going to call this Docker file, just like that. Okay, and we need to specify a few settings. So I just want to just adjust this a little bit. There we go. So now we are within our Docker file. So let's zoom in a bit for you guys. And we need to go ahead and start off with our operating system. So just a bit more information on a Docker file. So basically a Docker file is technically a text document that contains all the instructions and commands that will be needed for building an image. So the first thing that we need to do, as you guys would assume, is we need to add in an operating system. So we can head over to Docker Hub to find a Linux operating system that is Python based per se. So you can head over to hub.docker.com, and what you want to do is you want to just head over to this website, and I will put this link also in the description below for you. You want to scroll down and you want to look for the Python based Docker images here. So here's Python. Okay, so this is the official Docker image, and you can scroll down here and look for an operating system of your choice. So a tag per se. Have a look for something that you feel is going to work best for you. So that's really up to you. So I prefer the 3.8 Buster version. This is just my preference. So I'm going to use this one here. So here in my Docker file, I will define that as from Python :3.8-Buster. Okay, so you can decide what you wish to use there. The next thing that we need to do is we need to add in the following command, which is env Python buffered equals 1. Okay, so this is going to ensure that any Python output is sent to our container logs. This is very helpful for debugging and picking up any errors. Next thing that we need to do is create a working directory, and in this case we will be calling it work_dir/Django. So I'm just going to say work_dir, so work directory /Django, and you can name this anything you want your directory. Okay, and now that we are within our working directory, we can go ahead and copy our requirements.txt file to our Docker file. So we have our requirements.txt file, so we can just simply go ahead and say copy requirements.txt. Now I prefer to put double emphasis on the requirements.txt to ensure that all of the packages and dependencies are copied. Great, next thing that we need to do is we need to specify in our Docker file that we want to run our requirements.txt file. So we want to run these packages or install it per se. So you can just say run pip3 install-r requirements.txt. Okay, so you want to go ahead and run it. Okay, all right, let me zoom out a bit here. And once you've done that, we need to go ahead and copy all of our files here, okay, and everything in our files and our folders from our main project directory. So to do this, we can say copy dot space dot. Okay, so make sure you've got the space in between here. They can't be together, they need to be separated. Perfect. Now, to actually run our Django application, we need to add a command which can be instantiated as follows. So cmd, which stands for command, and then python manage.py run server at 0.0.0.0 at port 8000. Okay, so we want to make our application available from outside the container. This is the reason for the zeros, okay? And we will then run the port as normal on port 8000 for Django. So we're going to expose our Django port at port 8000 for our container. So make sure you've got this in place. So that is how you can create your Docker file. All right. Right. So the next thing that we want to do is create a Docker compose file, which is basically going to be a YAML base file. So what we can do here on the left here with our root directory here, we can go ahead and just go ahead and say right click, new file, and we want to create a docker compose.yaml file. So we can say docker-compose.yaml. Okay, so let's add some spaces as well here, just to add some lines. So you're probably wondering, what is a YAML file? So YAML is basically a data serialization language that is very readable. That's the simplest way that I can go ahead and explain it. So unlike many programming languages, which can be hard to decipher, that's not really in natural English, YAML is very much in a natural English sort of type, you could say. Okay. Right, so with Docker Compose, there are many compose specifications which you can read about on Docker Hub. So according to these specifications, we can technically perform different actions. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's make this a bit bigger. So make sure you're in your Docker Compose file. And the first thing that we want to do is we need to specify our version. Okay, so we're going to use version 3.8, of course. So we can define that right at the top as version. And in double quotes, 3.8. So make sure you're very exact here and precise, because spacing, indentation is very important here. So just specify your version and press enter. Next thing that we want to do is we want to define all the services that we want to run within our container. So when we define our service, we are only going to go ahead and say the following, which is services. Now you can press enter, and we only want to have an app for this service. So a single Django app, which we want to build and containerize. So we can just add a space on this new line, and we can say app. All right. So once you've got that set, okay, we can move on to the next step. And next thing we want to do is press enter and add a space. So make sure you don't indent. So just add a space. And we want to go ahead and build our Docker file right here. Okay, now to build this Docker file, we can just simply say build, okay, and you can just add in your colon, space, and just a point will be more than sufficient. So make sure you are building it, all right. The next thing that we want to do is define a volume. Now we will essentially describe a folder which refers to our directory and link it to the folder that is on our container. And this will pretty much be as stated in our work directory /Django. So what we can do now is just under build, directly under, we can specify volumes. Okay. And we can just go ahead and press enter. And what you want to do is you want to just add in a space, and then you will add in a hyphen, and then a space, and then dot, colon /Django, since we are effectively referring to our Docker file here, to our work directory here, as our volume. Okay, next thing that we want to do is define our ports. Okay, so what ports that we want to map across. So what we can do is press enter, backspace, and in line of volumes we can say ports, colon, and press enter, space, and then we need to add in our hyphen, and then just add a space here, and we can define our ports. And since we want to map across our ports, we can access our container, okay, which is used to expose these ports. So I'm just going to say 8000 for now. Okay, now we can press enter, and backspace. Okay, so now we're in line. Next thing that we want to do is define our image. Okay, so what we can do now is tag or add a name to our image. So in our case, we're going to say app Django. So under image, I'm going to say image and app Django. Okay, you can name this anything that you want. So tag and add your Docker image name. Press enter. Next, we want to specify our container name. So I'm going to say container underscore name. And here you can call it anything that you want. And I'm going to say my underscore first underscore Django underscore container. Now you can say anything here you want. This is a bit wordy. You can decide what you want. And the next thing that we want to do is specify our command. So this is literally what we did earlier on here. Okay, but we're just going to change the syntax a bit. So in Docker Compose here, we can say command. And we can just literally use the code that we added here. You can just copy that over and paste it in like so. Okay, so we want to run a command that will make our application available from outside the container, from external IP addresses, hence the 0.0.0.0.0, and that's the reason for that. We're then going to run the port as normal on port 8000 for a Django. All right, so make sure you've got your Docker-compose file in place. Now I'll zoom out for you here, and you can take a good look at what your Docker Compose file should be and how it should be structured. All right, so that's Docker Compose. Right, so the moment that we've all been waiting for, let's go ahead and build our first Docker image locally. All right, so let's go ahead and just move our terminal a bit up so it's a bit readable. And let's move it a bit more. Okay, so here in your terminal, you just want to run the following command, which is docker-compose build. Okay, so we're going to build our Docker image now with the following command. So you can press enter. And there we go, so the process has started. Now do bear in mind the first time that you build your Docker image is going to take a while, but rest assured, when you make changes to your application and you run Docker Compose build again and you build your Docker image, it's going to be significantly faster because each time you build your Docker image, it's going to cache what you've done before. So it will remember essentially what you have pushed and created in your Docker image in the specifications of your source code. So let's just wait for that to be completed. All right, perfect. So we waited a while and we can now see our Docker image was built here. So we can see here it has written that image and we can see that thread right there. Perfect. So what you want to do now is you can minimize everything, and I would suggest that you just reopen Docker Desktop so it never shows the first time. So go ahead and reopen Docker Desktop. And you should then see your Docker image appear right there. So let's just wait for it to open and just wait for it to compartmentalize. Let's just close this up. And there we go. So now you can see your Docker image here. So we called it as the name and tag app Django. So if you refer here to our image that we went ahead and stated, we refer to it as app Django, and we can see that we built our very first Docker image. So well done. That's how you can build a Docker image, and you've built one locally, and we've containerized our Django application. And yeah, that's how we can build our Docker image. Now, let's say we want to run our Docker container locally. So to do that, all we need to do is head back over to our console. Let's just say clear for now, so CLS, and we can just say docker-compose up. So this is going to run our Docker container for us. And you can see there it's creating our container, my first Django container, and it's just attaching it to the default network. And we can see there it's now running my first Django container. And if you want further proof of this container actually running, you can head over to Docker Desktop, click on the container section here in the top left, and we can now see, based on Project Elevate, we have one container that is running, which is known as my first Django container, which is linked to our image here, app Django, and it's running, as you can see there, exposing port 8000 on our local host. So what we can do is test this out, and we can just put in our local host there, and there we go. So our application is running. And if you were to head over to your application here, we can now see all those requests being served through our Docker container here. So what has essentially happened is we built a Docker image, which we then went ahead and transformed to run as a Docker container, since it has attached it to its own container named my first Django container. And we can just make some requests here to this application, and we can see it's receiving all those requests via our Docker container, or our Django container in this case, what we named it. Okay, so that's how you can go ahead and run your Docker container. So how to build a Docker image with Django, and how to run your how to transform your Docker image as a Docker container. Right, so let's say we want to clean everything up. We can just, in our console here, say Control-C. Okay, and that stops the container. Let's clear this up. Great, now you'll head over to Docker Desktop and you can now see it's now gray because that means it's now offline. Right, so let's just click on it here and we can say delete and delete forever. Okay, so the container is gone, and now we can head over to our image here and we can delete the image itself now. And we can say delete. All right, there we go. So we've also just cleaned up our resources. All right, guys, so that is how you can containerize your Django applications in terms of building and running your Docker containers. All right, so that's it, guys.